evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always.
The Honourable Assembly is now in session.
Administration of oaths or affirmations.
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements.
None.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Annual Report 2017, Hazard Management, Cayman Islands, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
The Honourable Minister of Financial Services.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 2016-2017 Annual Report of the Hazard Management Cayman Islands for the 18-month financial period ending 31st December 2017. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the annual report tabled for Hazard Management Cayman Islands outlines the strategic approach of the department and provides an overview, Mr. Speaker, of activities undertaken during the past budget cycle in the following areas: preparedness and public awareness, response and communication. Mr. Speaker, an overview of the 2017 hurricane season and earthquake activity would be appropriate at this time before sharing some of the activities undertaken by Hazard Management during this period. And so I will provide a brief overview of the activities during 2017. As we all recall, Mr. Speaker, the 2017 Atlantic hurricane season was extremely active, featuring 17 named storms, 6 of which became major hurricanes, Category 3 or above. However, once again, the Cayman Islands was thankfully spared from the significant impacts of such. Severe weather alerts and warnings were issued for a number of systems that track close to the Cayman Islands, including Tropical Storm Brett in June, Tropical Storms Franklin and Harvey in August, and Tropical Storm Nate in October. But in each case, the systems did not result in any local damage. Mr. Speaker, in early September, Hurricane Irma wrought terrible destruction on several other overseas territories, including the islands of Turks and Caicos, Anguilla, and the British Virgin Islands. Mr. Speaker, the suffering and hardships that resulted from Hurricane Irma produced an outpouring of support from the people of the Cayman Islands and Hazard Management. With the approval of the Cayman Islands government, Hazard Management provided both personnel and relief items to the affected islands. During the 2017 earthquake activity, Mr. Speaker, on the 8th of April 2017, our seismograph network registered a 4.0 earthquake 69 miles south of Georgetown, and Hazard Management received reports that it was felt by residents in West Bay. Mr. Speaker, on the 31st of July 2017, another 4.0 tremor occurred 27 miles off the coast of Bodden Town, and this event generated many felt reports, mostly from residents in the Georgetown area. Fortunately, in both cases, there were no reports of damage. Our seismic stations and tsunami monitoring gauge continues to provide information to both the regional and global earthquake and tsunami monitoring centers. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the preparedness and public awareness activities undertaken in preparation of hurricane season in 2017, Hazard Management personnel prepared and delivered a vigorous public awareness program comprised of outreach presentations to various public and private schools, businesses, and to civil servants. They engaged in numerous media, radio, and television appearances and engaged with residents at several community-based events, including the Agriculture Show, the Ritz Health Fair, and drop-ins at the local hardware stores in association with National Day of Preparedness activities. Mr. Speaker, in April 2017, Hazard Management co-hosted the visit of the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, and over 1,300 residents toured the aircraft and met with the pilots. Throughout the season, awareness trips ran across 4 local radio stations at a frequency of 100 times per day. In observance of the International Day of Disaster Reduction 2017, Hazard Management collaborated with the Cayman Islands Red Cross to provide a 3-day information exhibition for various primary school classes from October 10th to 12th. The objective was to provide students with the knowledge to reduce their risk before, during, and after a disaster. Hazard Management also continued to support one of its key partner agencies, that being the Department of Children and Family Services, in 2017, by assisting with the training of 160 persons in a 2-day shelter management training. In addition, Mr. Speaker, Hazard Management ensured that the shelters were appropriately provisioned, that generators were functioning and fueled, and that the shelters in general were ready to be activated and made operational at short notice. Mr. Speaker, Hazard Management also leveraged technology in their preparedness activities, and their website and social media pages continue to achieve greater reach in 2017. A perfect example of this, Mr. Speaker, was the 185 posts that Hazard Management made on Facebook, which generated over 380,000 views. Other preparedness activities carried out within this period included ongoing development of the Community Emergency Response Teams, or CERT program, within the districts, and the delivery of training and oversight of the development and implementation of continuity of operation plans. These plans set out how each government entity will restore and deliver of core functions and services to the public as rapidly as possible following an impact. Mr. Speaker, on the evening of the 23rd of July 2017, a report was received by 911 operators of the Department of Public Safety Communications of a fire at Seoul Wholesale Petroleum Facility located at the South Church Street. Officers from the Cayman Islands Fire Service, the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, and Hazard Management responded to the scene, and a precautionary evacuation order was established for a 1-mile radius around South Church Street facility, and access to the area was restricted with roadblocks. Mr. Speaker, while the National Emergency Operations Centre, or commonly known as the NEOC, was not activated at this instance, multidisciplinary post-event briefings, which Hazard Management played a key role in, resulted in the implementation of a procedural change to enhance emergency responses in the face of rapid onset events. Over the course of 2017, Mr. Speaker, Hazard Management participated in several simulations of exercises with other stakeholder agencies to test the National Disaster Response Mechanism and ensure that the first response agencies and agency support team representatives who deploy to the NEOC were familiar with the required procedures. Mr. Speaker, these exercises included a tsunami exercise in April, the annual hurricane exercise in May, and an exercise for consular agents in June. In the tsunami exercise, Flow and Digicel were required to send a notification message to all customers, which was linked to a survey requesting and asking for feedback about the test. The survey elicited an excellent response from over 1,400 residents, and it overwhelmingly showed that residents felt that a mass public notification system is vital for public safety. Based on the survey results, it was concluded that text messaging was not a reliable method for timely emergency notification. Some persons received it, others didn't, and that Hazard Management and OFREG began investigating other options with telecommunication network providers. The hurricane exercise was well attended and achieved a number of objectives, including testing with coordination mechanism between agencies and generally building familiarity with the confidence in the process. Mr. Speaker, a summary of lessons learned was recorded for the purpose of improving preparedness and response components of the national plan. Mr. Speaker, an objective of the consular exercise was to re-engage with consulates to confirm the role and responsibilities and understand their expectations in the event of a disaster that impacted their citizens living here in the Cayman Islands. The consular representatives play an important role in the evacuation process, and going through the scenarios of hazard management afforded them a better understanding of their capabilities, which resulted in a commitment to greater functionality in the event of a disaster. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier, subsequent to the tsunami exercise conducted in April, Hazard Management and OFDREG conducted research in collaboration with the telecoms providers to identify a more reliable method of relaying emergency notifications to the public in the face of rapid onset event. As a result, Mr. Speaker, Hazard Management, in collaboration with the Ministry, successfully advocated for the implementation of the National Emergency System per the provisions of Section 7.1 of the Disaster and Preparedness Management Law 2016. Collaboration between HMCI, OFREG, and local ICT providers resulted in the proposal of a phased approach to implementation, and funding was secured prior to 31st of December 2017 as allocated by the government for Phase 1, which involves the remote broadcast of emergency messages on all radio networks simultaneously. Mr. Speaker, in December 2017, the communications infrastructure was further strengthened via an agreement, the government and the Motorola Solutions, which designed to ensure that the Cayman Islands, having the most modern, future-proof public safety and emergency communications radio system in the Caribbean to support all first responders, including those activated in response to a disaster. Mr. Speaker, Hazard Management conducted the necessary research and published the request for proposal, which resulted in the selection of the P25 system, which will replace the existing outdated analog radios with digital radios that have the capacity for features such as GPS location, text messaging, and encryption. Again, Mr. Speaker, the new technology will also enhance the safety of first responders and improve their response time by eliminating blank spots in certain parts of the islands where the analog radio reception is weak. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I provided a summary of the Hazard Management's annual report and attempted to highlight some of the key activities that illustrate how the work of the department enhances the country's resilience through public information and engagement, training and collaboration with key public and private sector stakeholder agencies, and improvements in technology. Mr. Speaker, a report on the financial performance of the Hazard Management will be included in the Ministry's report, annual report. Mr. Speaker, it should be noted at the end of the 2017, Hazard Management Director McCleary Frederick retired after being with the agency since its inception. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize Mr. Frederick, as well as all of the current and previous members of the staff and management of HMCI for their contributions to the development of the department and our country's national disaster response mechanism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
(2016-2017) Annual Report, Investing for the Future, Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure.
Honourable the Minister of Commerce.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today on the table of this Honourable House the 2016-2017 Annual Report for the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure, titled Investing for the Future.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking there too?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the theme of this report is Investing for the Future, which captures the essence of my ministry's key focus during the period covered. Mr. Speaker, infrastructure is one of the basic requirements of economic development, and it does not directly produce goods and services, but facilitates production in all quarters of economic activities by creating positive external economies. It is an admitted fact that the level of economic development in any country directly depends on the development of its infrastructure. As it will be evident when you review the report, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry invested in the future of our country through the promotion of commerce and via thoughtful planning and infrastructure development. The report spans over an 18-month period between 1st July 2016 and the 31st December 2017. It provides a wide variety of information related to the operations, trends, plans, and achievements of the ministry. Included in those, Mr. Speaker, are the audited financial statements, which received an unqualified opinion from the Office of the Auditor General. The construction industry plays a vital role in our economy. The introduction of the Builders' Law in 2017 will alleviate industry standards and provide consumers with greater confidence when employing contractors. The law also levels the playing field for industry players by ensuring compliance with regulatory requirements for board structure, recategorization of builders, and qualifications and competency of builders. Mr. Speaker, in 2016-17, we also updated our local building codes to take advantage of advancements in building technologies, improve the resilience and safety of local construction, and modernize the specifications of certain types of materials used in construction. These measures are a core component of the government's efforts to protect our citizens, ensure our economies can rebound effectively from the passage of a natural disaster, and to facilitate commerce. Through engagement and feedback from the construction industry, the Department of Planning has been working to alleviate efficiency standards by accelerating planning reviews and approvals, the inspections process, and the overall way the public engages with the department. This increases industry productivity through faster decisions and fewer hours spent queuing at our various departments to access services. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, in 2016-17, the department granted approximately $864.4 million in planning permissions, performed over 14,900 inspections, and conducted over 15,400 plan reviews. These efforts provide tremendous stimulus to the local economy by providing jobs and supporting local businesses. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the department continued updating the online planning system known as the OPS, which allows customers to submit plans and to apply and pay for permits online. This use of technology has improved efficiency by enhancing communication channels between the department and its customers. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to highlight the transformation carried out in the management of major public sector projects. These changes have improved overall value for money, accountability, and the management of risks which have previously contributed to project failures, cost overruns, and delays in large-scale construction projects. Mr. Speaker, our Major Projects Office, the MPO, is presently managing government's investment in infrastructure projects that will enhance our tourism products through improvements at the Owen Roberts International Airport and the construction of the planned cargo expansion and berthing facilities for cruise lines. Mr. Speaker, the MPO is also managing the construction of an integrated solid waste management system, a long-term residential mental health facility, the completion of the John Gray High School, and several planned improvements to public facilities that will transform the landscape of the Cayman Islands. During the period of this report, Mr. Speaker, my ministry also invested in the future of our people through the successful delivery of the Public Works Department's apprenticeship program. Mr. Speaker, this is one program that we are particularly proud of, and participants of the program are led through a course which results in certifications recognized by City and Guilds, a trusted and world-renowned UK-based accrediting body for construction and other industries. Mr. Speaker, this program provides comfort to employers in the private sector because they know that graduates will possess technical qualifications that meet industry standards and also fulfill their competency requirements. Mr. Speaker, so far, 5 young Caymanians have received their certifications from City and Guilds in the vocational discipline of construction, carpentry, AC, electrical, and plumbing. Mr. Speaker, by way of an update, I'm happy to report that presently there are 12 students on the cusp of completing the program, 5 level 1s and 7 at level 2, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they all recently completed their practical assessments and are awaiting their final written exams in a few weeks. In the meanwhile, they are single-handedly, under the supervision of their Public Works Department mentors, constructing a building for the Department of Agriculture, a true testament of the quality of training they have received. Upon completion, all successful candidates will be placed in jobs within the local construction sector. Mr. Speaker, the 2016-17 National Community Enhancement Project, also known as NICE program, was a resounding success. Approximately 600 people were put to work for periods ranging from 1 to 3 weeks. Mr. Speaker, the project also provided an opportunity for long-term employment, as 7 participants from the 2016 program were successful in securing jobs at the Department of the Environmental Health and after participating in the project. Mr. Speaker, so far this year, 3 others were employed with the Public Works Department, and over 54 high-performing participants from the summer project were trained by the NICE project team and provided access to the DOE's ongoing Green Iguana Cull. Mr. Speaker, the second phase of this year's project will commence later this month on November 26th, with registration happening next week, Monday. Through e-government initiatives, my ministry is supporting government efforts to improve cybersecurity, build infrastructure resilience, and deliver faster, more cost-efficient services to the public. Mr. Speaker, these initiatives have transformed the way several of our agencies now do business and are a key strategy to mitigate the increasing demands for public services. One that was especially well received is the ability to apply for a police clearance certificate online. Mr. Speaker, my ministry continues to embrace e-government initiatives by adding more services since the period of this report. Such are the recently introduced Trade and Business Online Application Portal. Mr. Speaker, the e-government unit also supported the development of Caymanians towards full-time employment by utilizing interns who assisted in the area of cybersecurity awareness, business process reengineering, project management, and policy development. Mr. Speaker, the licensing and regulatory regime for small businesses has seen several improvements in 2016-2017. These stem from government's pro-business policies, which are designed to support small and medium-sized enterprises through the removal of barriers for entry to local entrepreneurs, and through policies and efficiencies improvements at the Department of Commerce and Investment. Mr. Speaker, an educational campaign was also launched for designated non-financial businesses and professions in an effort to promote industry compliance to further strengthen efforts to combat money laundering and terrorist financing. Mr. Speaker, this period also saw the unveiling of the National Energy Policy. The policy spans over 20 years, from 2017 to 2037, and seeks to establish a framework in which all stakeholders can identify and set the stage for achieving the target of 70% of total electricity generation coming from renewable sources. The aim of the policy is to enhance and embrace a sustainable lifestyle through responsible and innovative energy supply and consumption. Mr. Speaker, moving on, the Department of Vehicle and Driver's License continued in its efforts to provide improved efficiencies and better customer service to the public with the introduction of new vehicle coupons. Since the reporting period, Mr. Speaker, the department has made even greater strides in providing the best service to its customers, most recently launching a new online guest service for renewing your vehicle licenses. Mr. Speaker, another one of our departments, the Facilities Management Department, completed several office fit-outs for key government agencies within the government administration building, ensuring that those agencies were equipped with the tools necessary to carry out government's key priorities. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the department implemented a new work order management system. The new system allows the department, Mr. Speaker, to strategically schedule and respond to customers, allowing for better communication and, of course, increased efficiency. Mr. Speaker, looking ahead, I am positive and optimistic about the raft of services and product improvements that are slated for completion over the next fiscal year, which will bring greater interoperability and efficiencies to the way government delivers its services. We will also be introducing new policies and initiatives to promote and support our business community, in particular small and micro businesses. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I'd like to thank Chief Officer and the staff within the ministry for all of their hard work. I'd also like to recognize and thank the heads of departments that fall within the ministry, and of course, finally, Mr. Speaker, for all of the hard-working civil servants out there that make all of these achievements possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Government of the Cayman Islands, Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure for the 18-month ended 31st of December 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure.
The Honorable the Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honorable House audited financial statements of the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure for the 18 months ended 31st of December 2017.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking there at all?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few short words, sir. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the Ministry's financial performance is one of the key achievements that I referred to earlier in the report. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General audited and issued an unqualified opinion on the financial statements of the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure for the financial period July 1st, 2016 to December 31st, 2017. Mr. Speaker, an unqualified opinion means that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the ministry as at 31st December 2017 and its financial performance and cash flow for the very same period, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as elected officials, we are responsible for ensuring that government's fiscal responsibility, that government displays fiscal responsibility, and I am happy that my ministry is leading in this charge. Mr. Speaker, I won't go on, but again, just to say thank you to the ministry's financial team, Usually when I leave in the evening after our long meetings, there are usually at least one or two of them still in the ministry working. So I'd just like to recognize them for their hard work in achieving the Auditor General's report or Auditor General's, sorry, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General's unqualified opinion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Islands Airport Authority financial statements, 30th of June 2014, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report of the Cayman Islands Airports Authority for the financial year ending 30th of June 2014.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking?
Mr. Speaker, I'm also going to lay the report for the following year. If I could speak to both of those at once with your permission.
So ordered.
Cayman Islands Airport Authority financial statements, year ended 30th of June 2015, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport.
So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report of the Cayman Islands Airports Authority for the financial year ending 30th of June 2015.
Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Section 52.5 of the Public Management and Finance Law 2013 revision, I place before the Honourable House the audited financial statements of the Cayman Islands Airport Authority for the fiscal years ended the 30th of June 2014 and the 30th of June 2015. Mr. Speaker, the audited financial statement shows revenue of $26.5 million for the year ended 30th of June 2014 and $29.8 million for the year ended 30th of June 2015. This represents a $3.3 million increase in revenues over 30th of June 2014. The improved revenues, Mr. Speaker, was driven by improved passenger numbers as our tourism product continues to grow. Total expenditure for the year ended 30th of June 2014 was $21.6 million, while the authority recorded $20.6 million over the similar period in June 2015. Overall, there was a $4.9 million net result for 30th of June 2014 and reported $9.1 million net result for 30th of June 2015. The Cayman Island Airport Authority had total assets equaling $74.3 million as at 30th of June 2014, moving to $84.8 million as at 30th of June 2015. Mr. Speaker, this resulted in a positive net worth of $47.5 million as at the end of June 2014 and a positive net worth of $58 million at the end of 30th of June 2015. Mr. Speaker, these financial statements have been audited by the Auditor General in accordance with Section 29.2 of the Public Management and Finance Law 2013 revision. An unqualified opinion has been issued on the 30th of June 2014 and the 30th of June 2015 financials. The Auditor General states that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position and financial performance and cash flows of the Cayman Islands Airport Authority as at June 2014, 30th of June 2015, in accordance with international financial reporting standards. Mr. Speaker, I wish to advise the Honourable House that the financial reports of the Cayman Islands Airport Authority were delayed due to the change in management personnel back in 2014. And then ongoing investigations. These matters are now behind us and a new management team is in place. Since then, the management of the authority has laid 4 audited reports, including 2014 and 2015, before this Honourable House. This is a demonstration of the commitment, Mr. Speaker, to get financial reporting of the authority back on track. I'm pleased to further advise the House that we are now in the final stages of completing 30th June 2016 audit and expect to have the 31st December 2017 audit completed and laid before this Honorable House early in 2019. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to thank the Board and management of Cayman Islands Airport Authority for their efforts in producing these audited financial statements and the Office of the Auditor General for auditing them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cayman Maritime Annual Report, July 2016 to December 2017, Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
Honorable the Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 2016-2017 Annual Report and the related audited financial statements of the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands for the 18-month financial period ended 31st December 2017.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking there too?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the audited financial statements just tabled consists of the Statement of Financial Position, the Statement of Comprehensive Income, Statement of Change in Equity, and Statement of Cash Flow, and the notes to the financial statements. Mr. Speaker, the Statement of Financial Position of the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands as at December 31st, 2017, shows that the total assets were valued at $5.94 million, an increase of 7.04% over June 30th, 2016, restated. The total liabilities were $7.41 million, a decrease of 4.23% over June 30th, 2016, restated. Mr. Speaker, the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands was required to restate its financials ending June 30th, 2016 and June 30th, 2015 as a result of recognizing and recording its post-retirement healthcare benefits liability. The resulting net worths in 2015, 2016, and 2017 were $867,875 minus $2,191,211 and negative $2,292,577, respectively. Mr. Speaker, the Statement of Comprehensive Income for the period of July 1st, 2016 for December 31st, 2017 indicates that the authority reported a net loss before non-operating activities of $1,079,457. Mr. Speaker, as a result of actuarial valuations, the IAS 19 report performed at December 31st, 2017, identifying overstated amounts for defined pension liability of $1,213,000 and post-retirement health care benefits of $585,000, the authority recognized a total comprehensive income of $718,543. Mr. Speaker, speaking to some of the operations and achievements of MACI now that's contained in the annual report, the Cayman Islands continues to strive towards excellence, persistent in its hard work to make sure that the infrastructure of our maritime industry is sound, responsive, and dynamic. Mr. Speaker, this hard work has ensured that the Cayman Islands has kept ahead of the curve and remains the center of choice in the very competitive maritime market. MACI's ethos, client-focused excellence, innovation, and quality remains at the heart of everything the authority does and can be seen by its achievements during the 2016-17 18-month period. Mr. Speaker, I would like to reflect on some of Cayman's accomplishments during this period. A testament to the quality of the flag, Mr. Speaker, Cayman's performance continues to earn it the top whitelist rankings globally in the leading Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, for port state control. For the first time in Cayman's history, the Cayman Islands was ranked as the #1 performing flag state in the Paris MOU for port state control in July 2017. This is the 12th consecutive year that Cayman Islands has remained on the white list. Mr. Speaker, for the 9th successive year, Cayman received whitelist status on the 2017 annual report for the Tokyo MOU for port state control. Cayman Islands has made consistent improvement in our performance year on year and has been making steady progress over the past 3 years, moving up to number 11 of 99 flags listed in the report, demonstrating an excellent ship safety and pollution prevention record. Mr. Speaker, another notable achievement in the Cayman Islands is continuing to maintain its prestigious United States Coast Guard Qual Ship 21 status, in which Cayman is one of 16 flags. The Qual Ship 21 designation indicates the high quality of vessels flying the Cayman flag and is only assigned to the top performing flag administrations that have vessels listing or visiting U.S. waters. Not to go unnoticed, Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands has again been recognized by the International Chamber of Shipping as one of the world's top performing flag states, maintaining a top of class clean ranking and all positive performance indicators for the 6th consecutive year. Mr. Speaker, this high performance accomplishments reflect that yachts and ships registered in the Cayman Islands are regarded amongst the safest and most compliant vessels in the world. Mr. Speaker, the flag continues to grow in both number of vessels and gross tonnage. At the end of 2017, the flag had a total of 2,156 vessels, a net increase of 3.2% over 2016, and a total of 5.17 million gross tons. The average age of the fleet is approximately 11 years. Mr. Speaker, the vision of the Cayman Islands Shipping Registry is to be the leading maritime administration in the provision of exceptional service to the global shipping community. In pursuit of this, the registry has continued its dedication to excellence in service, ensuring the maintenance of first-class relationships with its valued clients. Aiding this endeavor are the offices and representatives placed around the globe, giving the registry a presence and influence in all major maritime centers. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands Registry has been persistent in its quest to expand its fleet and has continued to exhibit a high global profile by exploring new markets. In particular, it has been focusing on increasing the number of merchant vessels on the flag. In 2017, Cayman was able to expand its merchant fleet, which resulted in a 6% growth in merchant fleet tonnage, almost double that of the overall world merchant fleet growth. This emphasizes that the Cayman Islands Registry is dedicated to being client-focused, providing exceptional service to the global shipping community, and being the flag state of choice. Mr. Speaker, leading in the way in the regulatory and advisory services, Cayman has become a recognized center for technical excellence. Over the past 20 years, the registry has been involved with the majority of the largest new-build yacht projects in the world. Of the super yachts currently being built worldwide, the registry is supervising approximately 44% of those builds. The Cayman Islands has roughly half the market share for super yachts, which are yachts with a length of 30 meters and above. Within the ultra-large segment of the super yacht industry, which are yachts with a length of 80 meters and above, the Cayman Islands has over 80% of the market share, making Cayman by far the dominating flag state. Surprisingly, only 6% of the revenues earned by the registry comes from vessel registrations. The remainder is earned from other fee for services provided, including the oversight of new build yacht projects and the annual maintenance of existing vessels. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands Registry has been unwavering in its pursuit for the most favored nation status in China. Subsequent to the visit to the islands from the Chinese ambassador to the United Kingdom, the most favored nation status was confirmed for all Cayman ships entering Chinese ports. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also highlight that the Cayman Islands was host to the Red Ensign Group Conference in July 2017. The Red Ensign Group Conference is an important fixture in the maritime calendar of each member country. This annual meeting allows the UK and its Crown dependencies and overseas territories which operate ship registers the opportunity for detailed discussions. These dialogues center around shared interests, best practices, and ways to optimize the performance of the British Register in the international arena, both in terms of commercial success and setting exemplary standards in meeting international maritime obligations. As a member of the Red Ensign Group and the British Fleet in Cayman Islands, the Cayman Islands holds strong to the Red Ensign ethos, which is strength and quality through collaboration. And the Cayman Islands solidifies its standing as a quality flag dedicated to exceptional technical expertise, as well as high social and administrative standards. Mr. Speaker, in partnership with the Mare Forum, Cayman also hosted the 5th annual Cayman Islands Shipping and Yachting Summit. The focus was on the future and trends of shipping, trade, and trade patterns, as well as the yachting business in the region and beyond. Co-hosting this event was another demonstration of the authority's commitment to ensuring that the Cayman Islands is positioned as a leading jurisdiction in the global shipping community. In continued collaboration with the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture, and Lands, the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands again offered the annual Maritime Scholarship. This is reflective of the firm belief in the importance of education and dedication to helping the youth of the Cayman Islands build careers in the maritime industry, especially given Cayman's strong maritime history. Mr. Speaker, the successful recipient is studying at the University of Plymouth, undertaking studies in navigation and maritime science. Mr. Speaker, another major focus during this period was the continued updating of the merchant shipping law and related regulations. The extension of the Nairobi International Convention on the Removal of Wrecks was used to develop the Merchant Shipping Wreck Removal Convention regulations, and these regulations were published in January 2017. The convention provides the legal basis for states to remove or have removed shipwrecks that may have the potential to affect adversely the safety of lives, goods, and property at sea, as well as the maritime environment. Further, not only does the convention also offer the Cayman Islands government a significant degree of financial security in the event of a serious wreck occurring in Cayman waters, but also a significant new revenue stream for Macy through the issue of wreck convention certificates. This revenue is expected to be in excess of $200,000 per annum. So, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Auditor General's opinion on the accounts of the Maritime Authority as at December 31st, 2017, the Macy have received an unqualified opinion by the Auditor General without any emphasis of matter or other points. In fact, Mr. Speaker, this is the first time the authority has received such an unqualified opinion in the past 3 financial periods, and they are to be commended for such. This is a result, Mr. Speaker, of the completion by the authority of the necessary actuarial valuation, the IS-19 report, combined with the fact that it recognized its post-retirement healthcare liability and obtained UK legal advice, which identified a favorable position relating to the tax liability status of the authority in the UK jurisdiction. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the accolades that the Cayman Islands continues to receive in the global maritime arena indicate the incredible value that has been placed on the jurisdiction, and that we also recognize as being the gold standard in the shipping industry, in the sense that we are recognized as being the gold standard. This confirms that Cayman is not only a preeminent tourism destination and an important international financial center, but also the Cayman Islands is a dominant player and the flag state of choice for the super yachting industry in the maritime industry. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize and thank the Chairman and the Board of Directors of the Maritime Authority of the Cayman Islands, the management and staff of Macy for their respective roles played and for the hard work that is conducted in and on behalf of the authority and the government. It would also be remiss of me not to mention at this time the support and cooperation of the various ship owners, yacht managers, and other global partners and the local private sector for their valuable contributions via the Cayman Islands Ship Owners Advisory Council, its associated Yacht Committee, and the local Maritime Sector Consultative Committee. Without this broad-based and genuine partnership, the authority and the registry would not be the successful global leader that it is today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Report and recommendation of the Minister responsible for lands. The Veston and Crown land at registration section West Bay Beach South, Block 13C, Parcel 1, to the trustees of the Cayman Islands Rugby Club Charitable Trust, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands.
Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this Honourable House the vesting of Crown land at registration section West Bay Beach South, Block 13C, Parcel 1 part, to the trustees of the Cayman Islands Rugby Club Charitable Trust.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Block 13C, Parcel 1 comprises of approximately 47 acres of land that is predominantly in use as part of the Georgetown landfill site. However, the 1.32 acre western extremity of the parcel was severed by the construction of the Esther-Le-Tibbets Highway and accordingly is separated from the portion of the parcel used for the said landfill. The highway now forms the western boundary of the landfill. Cabinet had approved that the 0.51 acre portion of the western severed part of Block 13C, Parcel 1 be vested to the trustees of the Cayman Islands Rugby Club Charitable Trust by way of a grant of a 99-year lease at a peppercorn annual rent. The land is to be leased to the trustees is landlocked and cannot be accessed directly from the highway. The land was originally zoned as public open space, but was rezoned to high-density residential in keeping with the zoning in the surrounding land to the west. The subject land will form part of a 13-acre sports facility that the trustees of the Charitable Trust propose to develop at this location, principally for rugby, but also designed to accommodate cricket. 12.5 acres of the site are being leased to the trustees from a DART affiliate land holding company for 99 years, also at a peppercorn rent, and it is proposed that the government replicate these terms in its grant of the subject lease for the remaining 0.51 portion of the Crown land that forms the final piece of the site. Maps of the land to be leased with the proposed design superimposed are attached here, though, Mr. Speaker. A report of this matter was considered by the Cabinet, and after careful analysis and consideration of the reports provided, on the 4th of September this year, Cabinet approved the vesting of the Crown land, Block 13C, Parcel 1, approximately 0.51 acres, to the said trustees of the Cayman Islands Rugby Club Charitable Trust by way of a grant for a 99-year lease at a peppercorn annual rent and a use restricted to not-for-profit sporting facilities. Given that there is only nominal peppercorn rent payable under the terms of the lease, Cabinet has waived the requirement for evaluations to be obtained for the report to the Legislative Assembly, pursuant to the authority contained in 10.3 of the Government Vesting Lands 2005 revision on the grounds of public interest. Mr. Speaker, accompanying this report are all the documents specified in Section 10.2 of the Governor Vesting Lands Law 2005 revision, excluding these valuation reports for the reasons just stated. May it please you, sir.
Report and recommendation of the Minister responsible for lands. The vesting of Crown land at registration section Prospect, Block 23C, Parcel 232, to Cayman Islands Brewery Limited, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Education, Youth, Sports, Culture and Lands.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the report on the vesting of the Crown land at Registration Section Prospect, Block 23C, Parcel 232 to the Cayman Islands Brewery Limited.
So ordered. Is the Minister speaking thereto?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Block 23C, Parcel 232, comprises of a small, irregular shape, 0.2591 acre remnant parcel of the land that is located adjacent to Hurley-Merrin Boulevard in Prospect. The parcel was originally part of the Crown land, Block 23C, Parcel 64, now Parcel 64, Rim 1, which is the Prospect Public Cemetery. However, this parcel was split by the construction of the East-West Arterial Highway in 2007, and the undeveloped severed northern tip was later formally subdivided from the remainder and allocated the current parcel number 232. The entire public cemetery, Parcel 64, prior to this mutation, was zoned institutional, and this has not changed since mutation into two parcels. However, Mr. Speaker, the severing of the northern tip by the highway construction has left Parcel 232 unusable for future public cemetery use and incapable of development in isolation. It is effectively inaccessible since the National Roads Authority will not approve direct vehicular access to and from the Hurley-Merrin Boulevard. A map showing the location of Parcel 232 is attached hereto to this report. Parcel 232 adjoins land owned and developed by the Cayman Islands Brewery Limited. The company approached the government and requested to purchase Parcel 232 for operational reasons. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet approved this parcel as it was deemed to be surplus and could therefore be sold, and accordingly the land was valued and a public tender exercise was advertised and conducted by the Lands and Survey Department. The only offer received was from the Cayman Islands Brewery Limited with a bid of $51,050 CI dollars. A report on the matter was duly considered by Cabinet. After careful analysis and consideration, Mr. Speaker, of the said reports provided by Lands and Survey Department, it was resolved that Cabinet advised Excellency the Governor to approve the vesting of the Crown Land 23C, Parcel 232, to the Cayman Islands Brewery for a consideration of $51,050 plus stamp duty. In accordance then, Mr. Speaker, with Section 10.2 of the Governor Vesting Lands Law 2005 revision, 3 valuations had been commissioned for the land to be vested, 1 from the Government Lands and Survey Department and 2 from private sector valuation companies. As approved by Cabinet, the vesting of land of Block 23C, Parcel 232 is recommended on the following terms and conditions. Vendor being the Governor of the Cayman Islands, so the purchaser, the Cayman Islands Brewery Limited. Property in question, Parcel 23232, area of 0.2591 acres, consideration $51,000 CI and $50. Each party, Mr. Speaker, will bear its own legal costs, and the stamp duty is not waived. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, accompanying this report are all of the necessary documents as required by Section 10.2 of the Government Vesting Lands Law, Revision 2005, including the aforementioned valuation reports. Thank you, sir.
Questions, Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet. The elected member for Georgetown Central to ask Honourable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs, question number 17.
The elected member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you.
Honourable Premier, standing suspension, please. Standing orders. Standing order 80? 80. No, standing order 14.
Mr. Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 23-7 and 8 in order that questions may be asked of ministers after the hour of 11 o'clock.
Question is that the House allow questions to be asked after the hour of 11 a.m. All in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. The elected member, Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question to the Honourable Minister for Financial Services and Home Affairs. Can the Honourable Minister give an update on suggested legislative and regulatory changes to deal with the many issues surrounding foreclosures in the Cayman Islands?
Honourable Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for his question. Mr. Speaker, as I had indicated previously in this Honourable House, the Ministry of Financial Services requested the Law Reform Commission in the fourth quarter of last year, 2017, to conduct a comprehensive legislative review of the Cayman Islands mortgage framework. The Law Reform Commission has advised that it has completed its review of the mortgage framework, which included examining formation and analysis from the local financial services industry. The Commission, that is the Law Reform Commission, Mr. Speaker, is currently in the process of finalizing its report, as I have been reliably informed, on the review of the Cayman Islands mortgage framework. Mr. Speaker, I have been informed that once the report is finalized, it will be published for wider stakeholder and public consultation. Upon receipt of comments following publication of the report, the Law Reform Commission will be in a position to finalize its recommendations in the final report, Mr. Speaker, which will be submitted to the Honourable Attorney General and subsequently to the relevant government ministries for consideration.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Do we have any confirmed dates or given estimated time for some of these suggestions, or once the report comes in, when those reports are agreed upon, do we have an idea of whatever changes that are suggested, when they will be implemented? The basis for the question, Mr. Speaker, is to give an idea for those who are suffering from the issues surrounding foreclosures, to get a date or an idea of when the help will come with these necessary changes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would love to say that I had a crystal ball and was able to give an exact date and time, but unfortunately, I don't have that particular information to hand. But what I do have, Mr. Speaker, is the confirmation from the Law Reform Commission indicating that they intend to publish their report for consultation during this month, by the end of this month. And then there is a period of public consultation, which is a part of their normal process. And I understand that that could be quite lengthy, given, I guess, the nature of the issue, but also whatever the auspices of the regime that they run when it comes to public consultation. So that in itself will lead us into sometime next year, I'm sure. So once they have the public consultation process completed pursuant to their protocols, the recommendations coming in to them, they're in a position then to make the recommendations, as I said, first to the Attorney General, who will then disperse it to the relevant ministries, which those recommendations would cover.
The member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the minister can tell us what is the ultimate intent of this review, this study, whatever the Law Reform Commission is doing, and after what is the final objective?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated when I first said the government would take the position to request such a review, the ultimate intent has been and continues to be ensuring that any policy decisions that are taken and subsequent regulatory or legislative decisions that may be taken as a result are done from an informed position, having had the benefit of the Law Reform Commission's expertise in reviewing the legislative and regulatory and administrative landscape that governs mortgages. As I'm sure the members are aware, this is not a very simple area. It cuts across a number of ministries, a number of pieces of legislation. So the government wants to make sure that any decision that we take is based on information and an informed perspective, as opposed to just having a knee-jerk reaction in any way that could have the ill-fated, unintended consequences that we are all trying to avoid.
Member from East End.
Mr. Speaker, I hear the Minister, but it begs the question, why is this taking so long? And maybe she may not have an opinion on that, but we are now 1 year into this. And it, in response to a supplementary from the member from Central, it was that we were looking at next year for the total process to be completed. So we're looking at a 2-year study before anything is anywhere near in our sight. Would that be fair to say we're looking at a minimum of 2 years?
Honourable Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I left that crystal ball at home, but certainly in an attempt to address the question, and I want to, for full and frank disclosure, say to the member that I asked that same question myself. Why does the process take as long as it does? And I don't have the intricacies as to what the Law Reform Commission process entails. However, I do understand that this is an area that is not straightforward, and I do understand that there is work that had to go into it. I have done what I could. The ministry certainly has done as a result of my requests. The government has certainly been very keen to get the final recommendations and report. And so it is heartening to know that we are almost there to the point where our report is being tabled for public consultation. Again, the member, and for the benefit of the listening audience, the Law Reform Commission is a separate entity that has their own remit, and a part of that is, in this case, the request came directly from the government to look at a matter. Sometimes they take of their own volition to look at legislative matters, but certainly this is an area that we are very keen to hear from them as it relates to their research, their consultation, feedback, and ultimately their recommendations.
Member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know it's not the government's fault. They asked for a review, but would the minister agree with me that maybe it is more prudent for us to pay for these reviews as to get the Law Reform Commission to do it, and maybe the Law Reform Commission can make their submissions as opposed to us asking the Law Reform Commission, because it appears like it may be that they're too busy to do these things if it's taken 2 years.
Minister, do you care to?
At this stage, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Law Reform Commission for agreeing to the request. It is something that we certainly are very keen to hear from. This is not the first time that they're hearing it publicly on the mic for me, but I've certainly had a number of private conversations up to most recently the chair of the Law Reform Commission. I had an opportunity to speak to him directly in a separate event, and he is well aware of the need to prioritize this. And so I would just like to say that we look forward to the publication of that report. Ultimately, the public, including members of this Honourable House, will have an opportunity to weigh in through the public consultation process, which will be run by the Law Reform Commission, not by the ministry or any of the relevant ministries that may be impacted. So again, it creates that objectivity that I think is important in all of this. And so at that point, we look forward to getting the ultimate recommendations, and the government at that time would be in a position to take a more informed position about the reality of the situation.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just one quick follow-up. In the interim, there's been some discussion publicly where the banks have alluded to a code of conduct or an ethical sort of framework that they will abide by in relation to dealing with foreclosures and so forth. Is that still in place, and are the banks still in agreement to comply with that, and is government actually being able to give some input into what that code of conduct entails?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I beg your indulgence to consult with my staff for a minute. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have been reliably informed that the code of conduct that the member, I think, was alluded to, is a code of conduct that has been adopted by the Cayman Islands Bankers Association more broadly for their members. And so the specific confirmation about whether or not it's been updated and that would have to come, and the procedure for, the kind of checks in that regard would have to come from the Bankers Association, and we would have to get that information. We don't have that readily to hand. But what we can say is that certainly the Ministry of Financial Services, and I know personally, having sat in on a number of these meetings, as well as the Monetary Authority, have engaged with the local banks and the Bankers Association on the issue of foreclosures. And these dialogue and interactions have resulted in many of the local banks offering briefings and explanations to their clients on topics such as personal budgeting, mortgages, interest rates, and other kind of general awareness and education initiatives as a result.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister confirm that I met with her to discuss these exact recommendations, and this is the foundation upon which these inquiries and requests were requested?
Honourable Minister.
I can confirm that I met with the member. However, this train had left the station long before that meeting. I do confirm that it is obviously a concern that is shared, as the member has brought the question, but to say that this train leaving was as a result of that meeting would be a misrepresentation of the facts.
Next question.
The elected member for Georgetown Central to ask the Honourable Minister of District Administration, Tourism and Transport, question number 18.
The Honourable Member for Georgetown Central, question number 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question labeled in my name, question number 18. Can the Honourable Minister say whether the government or the Ministry of Tourism is paying for any advertising that suggests, quote unquote, signing the referendum petition equals to a no vote for the port?
Honourable Minister for Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Tourism has not paid for any advertising that suggests signing the referendum petition equals a no vote for the port.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister say then the Premier's comments on a local radio in respect to this quotation of a petition, a referendum on the port equals a no vote, equals no to the port, whether the ministry has any correspondence with the cruise industry partners that will give effect to that theory that if we have a referendum here in the Cayman Islands, that ultimately they will back away from the deal.
I must admit that I didn't quite catch the question. Please, and then I'll take it from there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Premier has publicly suggested that if the country has a referendum on whether or not we should have a cruise port, that the cruise industry partners will back away from the deal. My question to the minister is, does he have in his possession, or the ministry have within their possession, any correspondence from the cruise industry partners to suggest that position uttered by the Honorable Premier on local radio?
Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me try to do my best to answer what I believe is the spirit of the question. The spirit of the question is if the member from Georgetown Central is a proponent of a referendum, if he is endangering the country of not having the economic benefit of a cruise berthing facility. And when a loan document is entered into, I don't think there's one of us in here that hasn't had to borrow money or borrows money. You have a time period for when the offering is made. It has been common knowledge that we have entertained the idea of the cruise lines themselves offering finance to the project. When they offer the financial package, they offer it with a timing of when it's good. I publicly made a statement a couple of months ago that we had a 6-month clock ticking. I don't think that's a statement that's out of the ordinary when you go to a bank or a lending institution to say, I would like to borrow money. And the offering also comes with an interest rate. So if we look at the timing of an offering that will expire because of the time it would take for a referendum in the country to take place, the whole process, and if we watch the ticker in the morning, we know that interest rates are going up globally. So the whole timing of where the project is will be stopped. And then the negotiation will start all over again. It will then, based on higher interest rates or maybe not as good of offering, have a completely different financial meaning to the country. I think that's the spirit of what you were asking.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to say I appreciate the remarks by the Honorable Minister, but I think he's mistaken as to what my question was. My question, Mr. Speaker, does he have any documentation to support the theory or opinion of this administration by way of the Honorable Premier? So,
I don't, when I got, just to say to the House, that when I received the question asking for basically the minister to answer something which was said by a third source, I thought about whether that should go forward. And I said, okay, let's allow it to go forward. But I think we're going too far into it. I think the Deputy Premier has given a fair answer to the House.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will then go on to another subject area. Supplementary.
You have a supplementary?
Supplementary question, but
Yes,
not
yes,
specific
yes.
to that. Can Sorry, I apologize, Mr. Speaker. Can the Honourable Minister say how much money has been spent so far in respect to advertising to support the cruise berthing project by the government?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I would indulge the member and commit to him that I will get that form in writing. I don't have that with me here, I'm sorry.
The member from Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd be happy to take it on the floor of the House in the next sitting so everybody in the country can hear it. But I'll ask my last supplementary question, and then I'll allow my other members to ask their supplementary questions. Can the minister say if there's any relationship or contracts with the PR firm called Fountainhead in respect to promoting the cruise port piers project by the government?
The Honourable Minister, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. To my knowledge, yes, there is work being done by them.
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just in a follow-up to the radio advertising that I've been hearing, can the minister say whether or not civil servants are being used to voice these radio ads?
Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the member for the question. Yes, there have been members of the civil service doing voiceovers.
Member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would the minister not agree with me when I say that that is crossing the lines of separation of powers where, and I'll explain, Mr. Speaker, our Constitution provides for people-initiated referendum. The people are represented in this Parliament, not in the government administration building. When you have civil servants voicing radio ads that are contrary to the effort being made by the people to initiate a referendum, I would take that as crossing the lines of separation of power. And I think that someone needs to look into why that is happening and put a stop to it.
The Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's the policy of this government for the cruise berthing facility. Every day in my ministry, civil servants work on that policy. Whether they work on the marketing of it, whether they work on the communication of it, but they work on it. I don't think that there's a difference between what they've done in voiceovers and what they do on a daily basis in performing their job.
Member from East End, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. No, I'm not going to address that, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister, supplementary.
Yes, sir. But the Premier want to know about speech.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Minister can tell us, in those advertisements, since that door has now been opened, I hear where the voiceovers are saying that there are possibilities, or there is possibilities that as those ships are decommissioned, that we will reduce by half the amount of passengers, I think they said. If can the Minister tell us how many ships and during what period over the next period of time will be decommissioned and whether or not they will be replaced?
Honourable Minister, Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I believe he would have to be a little more precise in the time that you want the decommissioning. And I certainly couldn't tell you that today, but again, if you give me the time that you want, I'm happy to provide you with that information. But it is a well-known fact that larger vessels that carry higher spending individuals pass here every week from Falmouth going to another port to spend money that we don't get. It's also Friday. I intend to make a statement on tourism for this country and to look at where we're going to be next year. It's also known that our cruise arrivals are going to start to drop, and it's being shown. It's also clearly understood that there is a tremendous benefit from cruise passengers when they arrive. The cruise berthing facility is basically a utility to get them from the side of the ship to Cayman. Whether they go to the turtle farm, or whether they go to the wreck of the 10 Sails in East End, or whether they go north side, or whether they go to a Bottom Town attraction. That is the responsibility of the government to create opportunity for the people of this country. And if I was in opposition, when projects came and I sat in opposition next to you, sir, you know that when they were projects that we looked at and we thought could help the economy, we supported it. I believe that this is a good project. And I believe that if I had the responsibility of representing a constituency that was close to where the port was going to be built and was going to provide hundreds of jobs for members of my constituency, my thought process would not be to stop this cruise berthing facility, but my process would be, how do I get the most out of this for the members of my constituency to benefit them?
Mr. Speaker.
The member from East End supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I could poke some holes in that political speech too. I could very well poke some holes in that, but now is not the time. The government always has its way when they get up, because they can shut me down. But that's fine, and I don't expect they would at this stage. But he asked me to provide timelines for this decommissioning of ships. Well, I can't, because the advertisement didn't provide any. It said over time. That's my research? That's not my research, Mr. Speaker. That is a fact being voiced over on the radio. So I am asking for it in black and white, the same facts. That's all I'm asking for, Mr. Speaker. But, no, you stay out this. No, Mr. Speaker, I don't engage in hypocrisy nor telling lies. The Premier said me and Adrian, them involved in some research. Mr. Speaker, I have never spoken to Adrian Briggs or anybody that's involved in this industry about that port. And I want that to be made very clear. So, Mr. Premier, stop that now. Never spoken to them.
Supplementary, please.
Whether it's Adrian Briggs or whomever you're talking about under your breath. I've never spoken to them on it, okay?
Supplementary from the member from East End.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. Sorry, member from East End.
The member from Newlands. Are you rising on a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
What is the point of order?
Imputing improper motives. You didn't say a word? Mr. Speaker, people are making allegations across the aisle that members in this opposition have made arrangements to finance this campaign against the people-initiated referendum through people who are involved in the industry. I want that clarified here today. If there's proof of that, any evidence of that, please provide it now. Otherwise, I'm asking for that comment to be withdrawn.
I don't know which comment are you referring to. Because I am honorable member, there was crosstalk going on, and I was trying to keep my voice above it to say to the member from East End, I need a supplement. I didn't hear that one. I heard the one I heard the remarks from both sides, and the one that the member from East End was trying to get an answer to. But we've gone afar off from question
Mr.
number
Speaker,
18.
If I may, Mr. Speaker.
Member from East End.
Thank you, sir. I heard the Premier saying it too. Don't worry. That's off mic, but we'll deal with that later. And I know how these things work, Mr. Speaker. I've been here like the Premier too long.
Mr. Member
Mr.
from East End.
I just want
please. Yes.
The Minister for Tourism, Deputy Premier, to whatever information he has, because the ad inferred, on my knowledge of shipping, that the ships are going to be decommissioned, thus stopped. That will eliminate those ships from coming here. So whatever that information is and what that he used to arrive at that fact, that's the information I would appreciate if he could give us.
Honourable members, you've gone so far away from question 18 that I've lost track of where these supplementaries are coming out from. What are they pertaining to in the answer?
Mr. Speaker.
The member from, sorry, the Deputy to the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to provide the member from East End the information, whatever I have. I'm also, right now, asking him that if I call and set up a time and invite him to come, I will give him whatever information I can to show him how we based our thought process going forward. I'm happy to do that with all the members of the opposition at a time. I've met with the member from Georgetown, but whatever we have that we have made this decision on, we're happy to share what we can, understanding clearly that the policymakers are not involved with the procurement process of it. But I believe that when the member from East End receives more information and the statements that are made from the highest members of the cruise lines talking about the western route of the Caribbean and the changeover from the ships that carry 3,000 people, the Freedom class from Royal Caribbean, to the Oasis class that carries 6,000 people, the common sense part of it tells you that when they have the ability to put a ship that is an Oasis class vessel, history shows us that the Freedom classes are removed from the route. And that is how they come up with the numbers that they will grow and fall away. So that information, I'm happy to share with you. I'm happy to set up a time.
Mr. Speaker,
from East End.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I am grateful for that, but I thought it would have to be provided in writing here. That's why I was saying that. But Mr. Speaker, I am a little bit set back that the minister is now prepared to give us presentations or sit down with meeting with information when, unfortunately, we requested at least 4 times in writing and verbally, and there has been no response to that. So I'm a little bit concerned or aghast at the fact that we are now privy to all this information.
Minister, are you replying?
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to drag this out. I believe that the member and I have a very good relationship for a long period of time. And I don't remember at any time you saying to me, I want to come and sit with you and I want more information. I will say that the deputy from the opposition, he and I spoke, and we talked about at some time getting together, and that conversation never went any farther. But I'm extending a hand in good faith because I believe that this is one of the most important decisions this country needs to make for future generations and for the economy of this island. Because I will tell you here today that it cannot, the cruise industry cannot fall away and be 50, 60, or 70% of what it is and expect to continue the Caymanian dream.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, just to give him a time frame that, Mr. Speaker.
Member for East End.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, the minister said he cannot recall a time that I personally or collectively was ever asked for it.
But
I would.
I thought you were going to give him a.
Yeah, I got to give it to him now.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Speaker, I draw my good friend to attention to the 25th of July 2017, which was the day we made a presentation to Cabinet, individually and collectively, at the request, invitation of the Premier for the opposition to make presentation in accordance with the Constitution to the Cabinet on budget. And we wrote the Cabinet, and in specific in particular on the Ministry of Tourism, we asked for presentation on the airport and the port. And we are yet to get a response from that. That's one. Two, the leader of the opposition, he's not here, so I'm merely saying what he said, has requested on at least 2, 3 other occasions, verbally, and I think he said in email, that we have repeating that request for those 2 presentations.
Thank you.
Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I thank him for the answer. I'm not sure if that means my extended hand to offer this presentation is being rebuffed or whether, I don't know what happened. Let's say the past is the past. I'm offering, which I've done previously now, to have a time set for the presentation. I not only offered it to you, but I offered it to every member. If that's something that we can do, we're happy to do that. If that's something that you don't want, tell me.
Honorable member from.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From
Central Georgetown.
Oh, you know what I mean? I accept his offer, Mr. Speaker. I'm not rebuffed it, but I know he discussed. He is being counseled by the leader, the Premier, about there's no future in the past. There is future when you bring it up.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick one, and that's it. I want to say I accept the offer by the minister to get an updated position on where we are with the sport. But I also would like to ask the minister to confirm his commitment to me verbally that he will meet with the constituents of Georgetown in a special meeting so my people can hear all the relevant information and ask the relevant questions to you, as you've given those indications to me by phone and previous conversations.
Minister, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I did speak to the member from Georgetown Central, and then I also spoke to the members of the government. It is our intention to have a meeting in Georgetown Central, and I will notify you when it will take place.
The member from Newlands, please.
Mr. Speaker, I will not continue on my previous line when I rose, but I just want to thank the Deputy Premier for making that offer to the opposition, and I will arrange with the members of the opposition for us to take it forward. Thank you.
Next question, please.
The elected member for Georgetown Central to ask the Honourable Minister for Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure, question number 19.
The Honourable member for Georgetown Central, question number 19.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the question number 19 and the order paper standing in my name to ask the Minister for Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure. Can the Honourable Minister say why were 3 culvert systems installed under the South Sound Road, and why is only 1 now in operation?
The Honourable Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the culverts were installed under the South Sound Road by the Public Works Department's Roads Division, which is now known as the NRA, as part of stormwater management for the area. However, Mr. Speaker, they were installed on private land, and as a result, several of these culverts on the seaside were blocked when that land was reclaimed.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say I appreciate the answer by the Minister in respect to why they were installed and the fact that they were on private property. But as a result of the fact that it is on private property, not Crown property, can the Minister say if the government has alternate plans to alleviate the rainwater if these systems are no longer in effect, considering that we recognize the necessity of them in the first place when they were implemented?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member has a private member's motion that digs into this a lot further. But the culverts were built to drain off the undeveloped land in the area, as well as some of the MRCU dikes. These dikes, in many cases, were on private property and have been filled in, and as well, the properties, the undeveloped properties have been developed or filled and then fall under their own individual stormwater management for those properties through the planning department. We do not have, other than ensuring that these properties, when developed, have their own stormwater management plans, we do not have any immediate plans for replacing the culverts.
The member from Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister say whether the last standing culvert system is under any threat at this particular time?
The member, the Minister, Commerce, please.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure that it does run through some private land, and if we can in any way maintain the culvert when the land is developed, I'm sure we will, but we do not have any agreements or any sorts of restrictions from the owners of those properties in developing and filling in the culverts and or the MRCU dikes, which were used to alleviate the reproduction of mosquitoes in those low-lying areas, but often served as a drain-off for water as well. But we do not have any agreements covering those properties to stop the developer from developing them.
Member from Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Minister prepared to at least commit to this Honourable House that his cabinet and his caucus consider making the inquiries as to securing the protection of those culvert systems? And the reason I say that, Mr. Speaker, is that culvert system is a major point of alleviation for rainwater that affects the Georgetown East constituency, upon which the Minister of Finance is responsible for, and in particular for the voters of Rand Dikes, which have been flooded out, and the government has spent much money in the past to protect their livelihoods in respect to that area. And Mr. Speaker, if that culvert system is no longer there, God forbid what will happen to those persons. So can the minister give commitment to this Honorable House that he will bring it as a matter of priority for discussion, at the very least, with his cabinet and his caucus to protect those persons in the Rand Lake area upon which the Minister of Finance is responsible for?
Minister of Commerce.
Mr. Speaker, let me assure the member for Georgetown Central that we have been working closely with the Minister of Finance and the representative for that constituency in ensuring that the Rand Lake Gardens area, which, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately has been built well below the required levels at sea level, in fact. And so there is an issue there in itself that these properties will always be lower than the surrounding areas even before they were built. The best we can do through planning is to ensure that when properties are built around them and roads are built, that we contain the waters within those properties and that they have a proper storm management system within the properties or along the roadsides, as we did with the redevelopment of the Linford-Pearson Highway. I will say this to the member, that I will continue to work with the representative for the area. We will continue to monitor the culverts, and in any opportunity that we have, we will add additional culverts or try to maintain the culverts that are already there. This was demonstrated on the Esseler-Tibbetts Highway, where we partnered with the MRCU in cleaning out their dikes and maintaining some culverts into the one remaining dike road heading out to dike that leads into the North Sound. So we continue to do this on a daily basis, so I reassure the member that we will continue to work with the representative on the NRA and planning to protect the people of Rand Lake Gardens.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my last supplementary question, and I want to thank the Minister so much for giving those commitments and that information. But just for a matter of clarity, I just want to see if the Minister can address this last question. Was there any discussions within the planning approval of the fill of those private properties upon which the two culvert systems that are now blocked? Were there any discussions with the planning approvals for the fill as to whether there could be some considerations with those private developers to allow maybe a tunnel system underneath? Was it even considered in the planning approval of the fill? Because if it wasn't even considered, considering the importance of the culvert systems and the alleviation of water, it brings a rather concerning matter for me. So if there was considerations, can he provide them? I am happy to have them in writing as to the minutes of those meetings, whether it was considered as to having some sort of arrangement with the private developer to allow those culvert systems to continue to work.
Honorable Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the member, Mr. Speaker, as I said, there were no agreements with those landowners. I would not have that information with me, but I will go back to see what the NRA recommendations were when the applications were made to develop those areas, and I will have those to him in writing.
This one.
The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr.
Last
Speaker.
Supplementary.
And I want to thank the Minister for all his answers so far. Is something similar, I know the Minister and I have discussed the problems in Newlands with the flooding there in the North Sound Estates area, but that is even worse because it's seawater. Is a similar solution now being considered for that area? I know the Minister said he was going to look at possible solutions and then get back to me.
The Honorable Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, again, there we have an area that we cannot raise the roads. The entire development was built at or around sea level. We even have an issue there where we're having to cap wells. We're having to cap wells because the salt water is actually coming up through the wells, so the wells are rendered useless. We have done some preliminary site levels there. We are seeking, I think we are in the process of having engineers look at whether or not we can drain, build little culverts or channels out to the sea to get that water to run off quickly when it rains, as well as when the water comes up comes over the road during the high tides, usually around the summer months, the El Nino periods. But yes, we are looking into solutions there as well.
Statements by the honorable ministers and members of the cabinet.
I have received several statements. Honorable the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as required by Section 11.6 of the Public Management and Finance Law 2018 revision, commonly referred to as the PMFL, I rise this morning to make this statement to members of this Honourable House with respect to the exceptional circumstance transactions that were approved by the Cabinet for the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development during the 2018 financial year that ends on the 31st of December 2018. These transactions were approved pursuant to Section 11.5 of the PMFL, and this statement provides details of the aforementioned transactions. Mr. Speaker, during this financial year, Cabinet approved an equity investment of $4.53 million to the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company, or Cineco, to meet the prescribed capital requirement, or PCR. As a Class A insurer, Cineco is required by the Insurance, Capital and Solvency Class A Insurers Regulations 2012 and the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, or CIMA, to maintain a PCR in order to remain in good standing with CIMA, meet its insurance business commitments, and adequately manage its risks. During the 2018 financial year, Cineco's capital fell below the PCR, and CIMA advised that it could not allow Cineco to remain below the PCR and set a deadline for them to become compliant with the PCR. In order to comply with the PCR for the remainder of 2018 financial year, Cineco required an equity investment of $4.53 million. Mr. Speaker, non-compliance with the PCR exposes Cineco to higher credit and liquidity risks that can negatively impact their financial position and their ability to meet their contractual obligations. In addition, there was a possibility that CIMA could have imposed regulatory sanctions, including the suspension of their license due to its non-compliance with the insurance regulations and the PCR. The closure of Cineco would be detrimental to the country, as Cineco provides health insurance coverage to over 15,000 members that includes civil servants, their dependents, pensioners, seafarers, veterans, and residents that have low income and those that have impaired health. The Ministry of Finance was unable to identify sufficient savings within its 2018 budget to offset the equity investment, which was approved via the appropriation captioned EI-50, Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, Cineco. Mr. Speaker, during the finalization of the 2018 and 2019 budgets, Cineco advised of additional premiums that would be required from the government in order to cover the cost of civil servants' healthcare insurance premiums. Instead of revising the 2018 and 2019 budgets to include the increased premium costs across the various output groups of ministries, portfolios, and offices, it was agreed that the total increased cost of $4.3 million would be budgeted centrally within the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development and then reallocated to ministries, portfolios, and offices during the 2018 and 2019 financial years. Mr. Speaker, for the supplementary appropriations to the Minister for Finance and Economic Development, you will see a negative amount of approximately $4.3 million for OE 8118 increase in health insurance premiums for civil servants that signifies the amount being moved from the budget of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. You will also see in the majority of cases where the output groups of ministries, portfolios, and offices are increased to reflect the reallocation to budgets to cover increased premium costs. Mr. Speaker, all of these reallocations decrease the appropriation to the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, but the sum will always, and it does, net to zero. Mr. Speaker, health insurance costs also increased for the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, and the output groups impacted were FED1, Policy Advice and Ministerial Services, increased by $16,178, FED2, Governance and Administrative Services by $1,267, FED3, Collection of Coercive Revenue by $20,951, FED4, Preparation and Publication of Statistical Reports by $11,357, FED5, Financial Reporting and Management Services increased by $37,265, FED6, Processing of Passengers and Inspection of Aircraft, Vessels and Cargo by $91,987, FED7, Identification and Investigation of Customs Offenses by $19,164, FED9, Administration and Processing of Applications by $2,987, FED10, National Mail Services by $62,351, and FED11, Monitoring and Reporting on the Economy, increased by $2,158. Mr. Speaker, the aforementioned exceptional circumstance transactions, which were approved by the Cabinet for the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development during the 2018 financial year, did not result in any risks of non-compliance with the principles of responsible financial management, nor did they result in any risk of non-compliance with any other ministry, portfolio, or office within the government. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
A member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr.
Do you
Speaker,
have a...
I beg your indulgence on the section Standing Order 32 to ask a few short questions.
The member is... Understanding Order 32.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just briefly to set the tone, if the Minister can tell us what is the purpose of that PCR as it relates to all insurances, but in particular, cynical.
Mr. Speaker, the PCR is a prescribed capital ratio or minimum capital requirement that all licensee holders of CIMA, insurance licensee holders, are required to maintain in order to retain their insurance licenses in good standing. In the case of Cineco, Cineco does provide insurance for primarily the government, but it also provides insurance coverage, health insurance coverage for members or third parties, members of the public. And that capital ratio that is prescribed by CIMA is done so in order to ensure that at all times Cineco will have the ability and capability of meeting its obligations to fund and pay for healthcare claims as and when they fall due.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for that, because that's as I know it as well, but for the edification of all of us. And that is prescribed by law. It started when somewhere around 3 million, I believe, as I recall, years ago. 3 million, and based on a percentage of their risk, I think it kept increasing. Now it's up 4.3 or something like that, 5 million. Why is it then, Mr. Speaker, this is prescribed and required by law? How can we lose it? Is it not protected in SEMA by virtue of deposits someplace, bank deposits or the likes? Why is it used? Why is it we constantly have to put this prescribed amount in? Because this is a couple of times during my tenure that we have had to budget 3 million, another 3 million, another 3 million. Why is it being used after it has been transferred to SEMA?
Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence. Let me consult briefly with staff. Mr. Speaker, if I understand what the member is asking, the prescribed capital ratio and that capital amount is not actually paid into Cineco, paid into SEMA. Yeah, we make that in the form of equity investments into Cineco.
Right. Why is it being used?
Basically, the claims exceed expenses of operations exceed Cineco up to that point has been operating at a loss, and we've taken steps to restore it.
Honourable members, purpose of Standing Order 30 and 2 is to purpose of clarification.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker.
Member from East End.
Mr. Speaker, and that's what I'm trying to get, because if the minister can explain to us, that money goes to Cineco as a protection of their risk. And we are responsible for that. Just like the board of directors of other insurance companies are responsible to ensure they have their risk covered in accordance with law. But that money is protected by law. Why is it that Cineco is dipping into that when their money has expired, their operational expense is at a loss? Why do they dip into that? Is it not a responsibility of the board of directors of Cineco to come to their only shareholder and say, we need money to cover our operational expenditures, and leave that money there?
Minister of Finance.
Crave your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the best way I think I can answer the member's question is that, as I've stated, Synaco is required to maintain a minimum amount of capital. And there are circumstances. It is there to ensure that Synaco can meet its obligations as and when they fall due. And, Mr. Speaker, if their obligations exceed what they have, they do eat into the capital and take it below that. But it has to be restored. And that is the reason for these equity injections by the government from time to time in order to make sure that CIMA is at all times solvent and complies with the law and the regulations with regard to the minimum capital that they must maintain.
A member from Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for clarity on the section 32 of the standing order. Just to kind of frame what the clarity I'm looking for. Per the annual reports issued by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, in the last 45 years, the insurance sector had net profits over $100 million. And every year, we seem to be finding ourselves in a position where the civil service and the government seems to be subsidizing the retirees of the private sector. With that said, Mr. Speaker, what I'm really looking for in terms of clarity is, does the government intend to look at a policy to deal with this? Because this, Mr. Speaker, cannot go on. This is something where every year the private sector is making a ton of profit, and the government is stuck with a lot of the losses. And even though it is said exceptional circumstances, the truth of the fact is, based on the line of question, this has now become the norm. So is it still exceptional? And the question is then, what are we doing then to make sure we fix this going forward? Because this cannot continue. And we have been voting money every single year for it. Thank you.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, the ministry, in conjunction with Synaco, is preparing to seek to undertake a strategic analysis and understanding of Synaco, its operations, understanding whether what they do continues to be fit for purpose, and overall look at the operations and understand and to make recommendations to government. That process has begun in terms of defining exactly what it is that we seek to gain from this review. And so I can assure the member that it is being looked into very much.
The Honourable the Minister of Financial Services.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of this Honourable House may recall that I made a statement in June during the fourth meeting of the 2017-18 session of the Legislative Assembly regarding additional funding approved by Cabinet for activities related to financial services. Mr. Speaker, the approved increase of output group FSC 21 by CI 740,000 and output group FSC 22 by 100,000 was made due to exceptional circumstances, and while this increase will have an impact on government's forecasted operational surplus, there was no anticipated impact on the principles of financial management as specified in the Public Management and Finance Law. Mr. Speaker, the approved increase was made due to several reasons that meet the definition of exceptional circumstances. First, Mr. Speaker, as the year began, the extent of the internationally driven challenges to Cayman's financial services industry became more acute. Meetings and discussions related to the EU's list of non-cooperative jurisdictions that occurred early in the year revealed the extent of which external pressure would be placed on changes to Cayman's regulatory regime. Then there was the UK's sanctions and anti-money laundering bill and the legislated mandate to attempt to impose public beneficial ownership registers on all overseas territories. Second, Mr. Speaker, these changing conditions were viewed as potentially having a negative impact on the financial services industry. This industry accounts for over 50% of GDP and over 15% of total employment, and any negative impact of a decline in business due to external factors would have a potential for direct and ripple effect through our economy. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the immediate threat to the economy made it clear that quick action was needed, given that the response plan was dependent on an increase in staff capacity and an engagement strategy with international stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, while I did outline the response plan back in June, I will highlight the key action steps that have been and are being taken. Mr. Speaker, the need for greater engagement with the European Union regarding its list of non-cooperative jurisdictions was clearly identified as a priority. Direct engagement has proven to be most effective thus far, and an increase in the number of visits to the EU to engage with stakeholders is occurring. I have personally engaged with a number of ambassadors and permanent representatives from EU member states on 2 occasions this year, and there have been a number of other visits at the technical level. Mr. Speaker, at least one more visit to the EU is planned for the year. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Financial Services has operated with a sparse staff complement of 4 policy officers for the past several years. Given the ongoing challenges presented by global developments, the need for greater research and analysis, and a more proactive approach to tackling domestic and international issues, a significant increase in the department's resources was needed. 2 additional staff has since joined the department, and recruitment is continuing for at least 2 more posts. Recruitment for the Department for International Tax Cooperation, which also has operated with minimal staff, is also underway. Mr. Speaker, recruitment of a full-time member of staff to support the work of the ministry to cover the UK and Europe, based out of the London office, is also being actively pursued. This will not only increase capacity, but also financial services expertise on the ground to enhance the efforts already being made in the UK, Brussels, and elsewhere in Europe, but in a more sustained and regular manner, rather than relying primarily on cross-Atlantic visits. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the persistent misperception regarding the role of the Cayman Islands in facilitating tax crimes and money laundering has contributed to the poor receptivity of certain facts regarding Cayman's transparency and compliance with international standards. So direct engagement with key stakeholders has had success. However, the country has not adequately addressed the role of the media and public in influencing political decisions abroad. And so a targeted public awareness campaign is in development, which will focus primarily on the UK in the first instance, but expanding to other jurisdictions over time. The initial work has been completed to identify key stakeholders, and several focus groups have been conducted. Further work is planned to assess the UK public perception as a basis upon which to develop and refine key messages. So, Mr. Speaker, and members of this Honourable House should appreciate the complexity of the challenges we face as an international financial centre. With a dynamic and uncertain international context I'm thankful that the Ministry has a dedicated team of experienced professionals who work closely with the regulatory agencies and our local industry professional and expertise. As a jurisdiction, we continue to rise to these international challenges. We continue to adjust our strategies, tactics, policies, and practices as conditions change globally, with the goal of staying a leading, competitive, and relevant jurisdiction in the global financial services ecosystem.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be brief, sir. If you
Honourable member from Newlands, do you have a question?
If you would permit me, under 32 of the standing orders, Mr. Speaker, I just have a quick question for the minister.
Okay, just bear in mind that it is for clarification.
Yes, sir. Could the minister say who these identified key stakeholders are and who the focus groups are that have been, or who constituted the focus groups which were conducted?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you, and thank the member for that question. I think that deals specifically with the media engagement strategy. The focus groups are in relation to that. I don't have those details to hand, but I certainly would try to provide that through the to the member directly if necessary.
Member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just going back to the key stakeholders, what I'm trying to get at, are we engaging with the private institutions, the law firms, the banks, and so forth, and also Cayman Finance? Are they intimately involved in this process?
Mr. Speaker, the government and the ministry, or through the work of the ministry primarily, has engaged a very robust stakeholder consultation process, and I am assuming you're referencing the EU process in this in particular. Yes, we've certainly since March of this year, we've had repeated and numerous meetings with industry. We've set up a number of industry working groups, which include members of Cayman Finance as well as all of the industry associations. So we have certainly taken and continue to take a very active and engaged consultative process in developing the responses and the position taken as a jurisdiction. And as you'll see, that certainly we stress the jurisdictional responses to this, which certainly includes views of the regulators as well as our industry professionals.
The member from Newlands.
Last one, Mr. Speaker. And I know that earlier in the statement, the minister talked about the resourcing concerns as well within her ministry. Are we looking to involve these key stakeholders in this marketing effort, considering the fact that a lot of our financial services institutions have offices in the jurisdictions where we have the most concern? One strategy could be for government to partner with them, help finance the effort, but this is going to be a huge undertaking. We shouldn't take it lightly, but is government considering doing that as part of the strategy, where they're actively involved in the marketing effort?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The approach has always been, and we continue to encourage private sector to engage with their local counterparts, as a ways to increase public awareness about Cayman, the role that we play in, as I said, the global financial services ecosystem. So that's certainly something that we continue to encourage, and in fact, we've supplemented the resources to help support, if necessary, in that regard. They have certainly been active in engaging their various contacts, but we, as a part of the overall strategy, we will look to see where appropriate and how appropriate about who should be interacting with what audiences, and it is certainly something that we've been encouraging from the get-go on this point. And so we will be looking to ensure going forward that the increased engagement happens at all levels. We've certainly seen it from the government side. I mean, I've been quite active in making sure we engage with policymakers across the pond, and the private sector is certainly encouraged to do likewise amongst their either partner agencies or similar associations that would be representative on the ground where we need to change public perception as well.
The Honorable the Minister of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to make a statement as to circumstances and reasons why the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure, CPI, had to request a reallocation of funds from within the 2018 budget under Section 11.5 of the Public Management and Finance Law 2017 revision. Mr. Speaker, it was requested that my ministry take the lead on managing the 2018 National Community Enhancement Project known as NICE. Members would know that this is a project that provides short-term employment for unemployed Caymanians. And as such, the government has decided to run this program twice a year. Work teams are supervised by foremen from Public Works Department, PWD, and the Department of Environmental Health, DEH, and the National Roads Authority, the NRA. The NICE committee is made up of representatives from a number of the departments and agencies, including the Ministry of CPI, PWD, POX, and the Ministry of Finance, the National Development Workforce Agencies, NRA, DEH, and Government Information Services. When the 2018 budget was prepared, funding for this project was not allocated. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it was necessary for the ministry to request additional funding. Ministry received an increased appropriation in the amount of CI 700,000 to PAH 4, Management of Public Recreational Facilities and Cemeteries, from the Ministry of Health, Environment, Culture, and Housing, which decreases the appropriations HES 21, Environmental Services and Research, by CI $700,000. The NICE summer program ran for 2 weeks, August 20th to the 31st of August 2018, and the winter program is scheduled to run for 3 weeks, starting on the 26th of November to the 14th of December 2018. In addition to general cleanup works, the program includes the following, Mr. Speaker: cleaning beaches of trash and seaweed, clearing public access to beaches, cleaning cemeteries, maintaining land-based park areas, cleaning debris from roadside verges, cutting and clearing bush, beautifying specified areas of the Cayman Islands, painting roadside curbs and sides, yard cleanup for the elderly, and recycling. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to advise the members of this honorable House that over the past few years, the NICE program has given many a second chance, including those with barriers to employment. Whilst we, the members of this House, all know this is not the only answer to our unemployment situation, I stand here delighted to say that this initiative has had its benefits, Mr. Speaker, and it continues to move in the right direction with helping our people gain access to long-term employment opportunities. The NICE Public Works Management team, under guidance of my ministry, was able to train and refer some 56 unemployed Caymanians previously employed under the NICE summer program to continue employment under the Iguana Culling Initiative. This, Mr. Speaker, is some of the additional employment assistance that I speak about, and also the second chance. The present government and members of this House supported funding for the Iguana Culling program, which is under the management of my colleague, Minister Seymour, in the amount of $1.5 million. With this funding, these individuals could potentially have work for at least 2 years, if not more. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the members of this House for their continued support and the committee for their dedication to making the program a success. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like to encourage the workers and the participants in the program to look at this as an opportunity to improve in their current situation. It is never too late to turn your life around and start again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may God continue to bless these Cayman Islands.
The Honorable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, during the last administration, the Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts, then Minister for Lands, received approval from Cabinet to purchase property on behalf of government behind the government administration building when that property came on the market. That property, Mr. Speaker, is legally described as Georgetown Central, 14C, parcel J21. Mr. Speaker, at that time, we also sought to purchase a piece adjacent to parcel J21, which is legally described as Georgetown Central 14C J22, and known locally, Mr. Speaker, as Scranton Central Park. Regrettably, this property was not for sale at that time. This was not the first time that the Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts, as well as myself, on behalf of government, had attempted to purchase the Scranton Central Park property. In fact, as representatives for the District of Georgetown, we had sought to acquire this property for well over a decade because of its value to the surrounding community, which we both know very well. Although the property was privately owned, the owners graciously allowed the community to use the land for many years as a park. And so over the years, it has been used for many things, everything from community gatherings to basketball games and more. It was, in many respects, an oasis for the neighboring community in an area that was becoming more and more commercial. The Honorable D. Kurt Tibbetts and I understood that should the Scranton Central Park property ever come on the market, it was important for government to buy it, to preserve it for use as a community park. And so, Mr. Speaker, the family did promise that should they decide to sell, they would let us know. Earlier this year, the family advised that the land was for sale, should government be interested, and we were interested. I immediately contacted the minister responsible for lands and had the process started to negotiate the purchase. 2 independent valuations were obtained, as well as a valuation by Lands and Survey to determine the value of the property. The negotiations between government, as managed by Lands and Survey, and the owners were a bit protracted, but happily last month the deal was concluded, with the property being bought by government for Cayman Islands dollars $272,500. This purchase price was based on the valuation done by Lands and Survey and considered fair value for the property. My government, Mr. Speaker, places a premium on ensuring that open spaces are available to the public, including access to neighborhood parks and play areas. These are not mere words, Mr. Speaker. The purchase and planned enhancement of Smith Barcadere, as well as the South Sound Boardwalk, are 2 recent examples, as is property purchased in the Prospect area that will eventually serve as a public park for the huge Red Bay and Prospect communities. Mr. Speaker, it is my intention as the representative of Red Bay, in which that particular property has been purchased, for that park to be developed over the course of next year. And Mr. Speaker, we still plan to utilize the old government administration building site as a public park once that building is demolished. God willing, we will get this done over the next budget cycle. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, this administration believes, and indeed the Progressives campaigned in part, on making our communities stronger, including through the creation of community youth centers that can provide social, recreational, and counseling services, especially for children after school. So, Mr. Speaker, the purchase of this property in Georgetown Central by government ensures that it continues to be available for the use of the community, the broader Scranton community, and can serve other community purposes in the future. The ability to improve the condition of the park as well as to expand the current quarter-acre site using the adjacent Crown land creates exciting possibilities. This government, Mr. Speaker, will continue to pursue these types of opportunities to improve the quality of life for the people of Georgetown Central and indeed for all of our people across these islands. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
The House will now break until 2:30. Crave your indulgence, honorable members. This is the second time this has happened. One of the things that members can do and should do is to grab their mic and call to the speaker to catch his attention. Because sometimes I can't view the whole room. Sometimes I don't. And so for that purpose of catching the speaker's eye, members can rise, they can grab the mic, and they can call to the speaker to catch the speaker's attention. If you have a question, is it okay? The House will break until 2:30.
With us, and I know he's busy running the country. We're going to take lunch now, and we're due back in at